we're going to bring to order the workshop meeting of the Lake Como Mayor and Council. We did have two discussion items on this agenda for tonight. We pulled the discussion item of streets, one-ways, and parking, but I will report on that when we get into my report in the regular meeting. We have one item on, a discussion item on our agenda tonight. That is a discussion and a presentation really for the council from our Borough Municipal Tax Assessor, Mr. Mark Fitzpatrick, and our Monmouth County Tax Assessor, Mr. Matt Clark. As many of you know, I did submit some questions to Mr. Fitzpatrick and Mr. Clark prior to tonight's meeting, basic questions, basic overview questions to get the discussion and the presentation started. This is an educational experience for our council to learn more about the Assessment Demonstration Program, otherwise known as ADP. It is the program that currently is the assessment program for the Borough of Lake Como. And the council will have that discussion with our tax assessors. And then at the end of that, if there are any public comments for the council after that discussion, I can open it up to the public to make comments to the council and direct those comments to me. So first, if Mark or Matt, if you want to just introduce yourselves and maybe introduce those that are here with you tonight.
Thank you very much. As introduced, my name is Matthew Clark. I'm with the Monmouth County Board of Taxation. I'm accompanied by my bosses, Mr. Denistrian and Ms. Luttrell, and my assistant, Mr. Wong. You all know you are municipal assessor, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity.
Thank you for coming.
To answer any questions. The purpose of this is to educate. A lot of math. We were given a handout of 9 questions. We've answered them in detail. That is what I've provided. The goal here is to have everybody understand why we're doing what we're doing, how we're doing it, give you my access so that if you have any further questions, you can contact me directly if you need to. Have both the taxpayers and the council members fully understand the intent and exactly what is transpiring year after year. And the overarching goal is to annually redistribute the levy. And what is most important is we have to, for purposes of this presentation, we have to understand the fundamentals of property taxation and how the local government is being funded, and your school is being funded, and the county is being funded, and that the services are connected directly to a desire to have a level of service. And in the coming directly from the Constitution, we have a mandate, the assessment function. So we need to separate the assessment function from the collection function, or the assessment function from the bill. That's very important to understand in this process, is that the assessment function, by law, directly from the Constitution, but empowered by statutory law, only has one purpose, and that's to create and maintain a mechanism for the distribution of the bill. Now, that levy is decided by the folks up here and in the county, and interestingly enough, the state right now, because of the contraction in the aid, is having a significant impact on how much we're raising by taxation. And we have to be mindful of that. If the assessment function is doing nothing, Mr. Fitzpatrick's job is to create this environment where we distribute it based on value. That's what the simplicity of the Constitution says. So if you're worth 5% of the town, you pay 5% of the bill. So his job is just tracking your percentage, your value. And as things change in the municipality and how so your proportionate share within your town is changing over time. your proportionate share of your town, of the 53 towns, is changing over time. Everything's moving, and then we have the next variable of also the levy moving, bringing in the fourth issue of how much aid is impacting the amount to be raised. And we have a fairly simplistic formula, which is addressed in here, on how we're actually coming up with the requirements for property taxation. So as we move through the questions of the night, I need to be tethered with the intent. The intent of the assessment function is creating this model. And the model is just, you have 100 properties, his job is to identify what their value is. Without passion, pride, or prejudice, it is just identify the value. And once you identify the value, then what comes next? The bill is not a function of the assessor. That's just math. That's downstream. It happens. So the issue of how it gets distributed is what we really need to focus on as being the assessor's job. Identify the market value. So having laid the framework of what the intent of the assessor is, creating this model, the ADP, in its summary, is doing something that is very straightforward. And it is, rather than in the old system, we would go to a revaluation, set the assessments equal to market value, and then let the assessments stay static, typically have the market appreciate, and year after year the assessments don't change, your assessment just becomes a fraction of the current market value. So in year one, the assessment equals market value, so the ratio between the two, the relationship, the percentage, is 100%. Let's say hypothetically in year two, we appreciate the value by 10%. Now, the assessment stayed the same, the market value increased, and your ratio is now 90%. Very straightforward math, simple, without adding all the zeros as COVID appreciation has done. Very straightforward process as to put blinders on, identify what the assessed value is, and then repeat that for every property in the town. The sum of the value of the town is its proportionate share relative to the value of the county. And so we can have this process whereby the assessor is doing the traditional revaluation. And the problem with that is the static assessments do not track the difference between the change in value in one part of town versus the next. It's essentially saying everybody is looking at all the sales, putting them in a pile, taking an average, and saying you all went up 10%, when in reality, some went up 5% and some went up 15%. Year after year after year that happens, and now we're talking about neighborhoods that are significantly overassessed relative to other ones. Enter the problem, and that's a real world problem. Why is this so important? It's because of our reliance on property tax. If this was some other states where the average bill was $1,000, I doubt there'd be anybody in this room. But it's not. We're talking about properties in this town that are paying $25,000, $26,000. So the issue is we have to be right with distribution. We have to be annually, we can't just assume, understanding that taxation, distribution is a zero-sum game. If we turn around and say, I'm going to reduce one property, or I artificially hold it down, someone else has to pay that bill. This town council says that they raise $1 million, whatever the number is. That's going to get raised. The question is, depending on the assessments, who pays what? And it has to be, constitutionally, it has to be tethered to your market value. And elsewhere in the county, certainly in the state, from the handout, I tried to give a document that shows the status of distribution in the state. It is the Wild West. We have people going for 15, 20 years grossly underpaying or overpaying their taxes. And so the important part, as we go through these questions, is for me to convey, this is not about the answering the issues about the tax bill. That's a spending issue. And I have no control over that. No one in the assessment function has that control. It's an issue of, is the model correct? Are the assessments correct? If the assessments are wrong, then they have to be fixed. They'll be addressed. If they're not representative of current market value, then they need to be fixed. And it's not, you know, the statutes in New Jersey say that the model is about the municipality, the presumption of correctness goes with the town. The entire ADP looks to shift that paradigm, to literally put the onus on the assessor to get it right. Have them have to annually produce a refined document based on new data. And so when we're going through this and we're saying, well, why do we want to do the ADP? Why do we want to do annual reassessments? It's because, number one, the Constitution says it, and our statute says it, and you know, why is it not being done? That's the better question. And it's not being done because self-interest, because it is volatile to have friction if you're politically, it is unpopular to make changes because someone's always going to be the recipient of change. No one saw the type of changes in value that we've seen connected to COVID. No, it's unprecedented. The expectation is that the year-over-year change would be a couple points, not double digits, not 20%, not 30%. But we can't deny the fact that those numbers are there. The market, the sales data is there. And so what we're asking is to say, what would we have done? Would we say, okay, the market data says that you went up 10%, but you don't like that bill because it shifts, your proportionate share shifts, you appreciated at a much greater rate than the average, so you're now a larger piece of the value of your town, so your tax bill is going up for two reasons. Number one, the levy went up because fixed costs. A third reason, there's less state aid, but then your proportionate share changed. Now, it's getting complicated, but we'll leave it at those three truths. Those three things change, your bill changed, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Okay, I understand it's all we care about is the bill, but all we care about is the assessment correct? How much is being raised? We have no control over that. And I know, I understand the explanation to someone that went up significantly greater than the average or what was expected is not an easy thing for me to stand in front of the room and deliver. The fact is, I believe from the data that we are provided, the larger than average increases are supported by current sales. It becomes very difficult to find issue with the modeling if the sales are present. And we can pull this apart and find properties, one-offs, and no doubt that we may, you know, get into that this evening. But the important part to see, before we open up to questions, is the intent. The intent is the model, and the model is driven by constitutional compliance that says assessments equal market value. And that's what this is. The shift that we're looking at today, not knowing who's in the room, We have the general questions about why the system and what's fairer about it versus the properties that went up significantly. Because that's how this issue originally got to me. So with that said, as a preamble to the ADP, I'd love to.
So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Clark. My concern, and I think the responsibility of this council really, is looking at the program itself. In your response to the general questions that I provided, you talked a little bit about the history of ADP and what it is, and I thank you for that. I struggle with why certain towns have it and certain towns don't. When we talk about fair market value, to me it almost doesn't seem fair that Town A is using it, Town B is not, County A is using it, County B is not. So I understand that there's a constitutional obligation, but I believe that constitution is for the state. So why are we obligated to do it and not other people?
Well, we're all obligated to maintain our assessments. It's not being done because many people throughout the state that have taken the same oath that I did are not doing their job. County tax boards throughout the state are not doing their job. They should be removed. So, but relative to one town versus the other, when it comes to county, there's not a significant concern hypothetically, theoretically, because the shared budgets are within the county borders. So if we look at just Monmouth, and everybody, as the intent of the law was, everybody in Monmouth was going to perform annual reassessments. And the board gave permission to opt out of that. And we have 7 towns that are no longer doing it. From the timeline that I provided, the fact is our board currently believes, if I may speak for the board, that we never really had authority to offer the opt-out. It was a safety valve from what was playing out in politics. And with the full expectation is, it says right in the law that we can't change or redirect the intent, which was annual reassessments, and that's irrefutable because we had a public meeting and every town in the county showed up at that meeting, and lo and behold, no one contested it until they saw the impact of it. That's the interesting part. And it's not, this became a political issue, not because anyone is saying that it's not fair. Again, as far as if you understand, if I do my job reasonably well and convey that the intent of the assessment function, our purpose, is to create the assessments to be fair, then that is being accomplished. When it comes to, so we covered that the counties, it has to be within the shared levies, within the county. As far as a municipality not doing it within Monmouth County, well, it was never the intent. It is crystal clear that the intent of the board was that all 53 towns perform annual reassessments forever. That is crystal clear that there is no sunset to this, just like the Gloucester County legislation that did not say, well, this is a 5-year test. It was, you're going to do this until legislation tells you not to. If they wanted it, if the legislature wanted it differently, they would have written that into the law. And the important part is, for the fair distribution, we currently have in our process statewide county equalization. And equalization is simply converting something from a fractional assessment to a 100%. So that if a town's assessments they're in static assessment and they are at 50%, that town's assessments are doubled when we calculate their percentage share of the county. So the idea of it being problematic that there's a town next to you that is not performing it, when it comes to the shared levy, they are absolutely being converted to 100%. So they're not escaping taxation in doing it. The problem is, in that town, it's not necessarily anybody else's problem, it's that town's problem. The distribution in that town is no longer fair. Because when you look at your neighbors and see certain properties that are at a different ratio, assessment to market value ratio than the town's average, if they're below that average, it's really straightforward math. If they are below the town's average, they are paying less than their fair share. If they're assessed to market value is above the town average, they are paying more than their fair share. And that will happen year after year after year after year until the next revaluation. That's the issue. This is about distribution within your town. So the idea of having a concern about your next door neighbor town, that somehow they're escaping their share of what? The county taxes? No, that doesn't happen. Annually, we go through an equalization table that converts all the assessments up and down. Theoretically, a town's ratio could be above 100. Let's say it was 110, and we bring it down to 100 for distribution purposes. So there is no concern about not being in, other than the fact that it was never the intent of the legislature. It wasn't the intent of the law that the governor signed. It wasn't the intent of the board when they made the order. It wasn't the intent of the Division of Taxation when they signed off on it. And it's simply fundamentally not fair in their town. And the fact is, we could create a list of everybody that's overpaying in any of the towns that aren't participating. A list that we've actually created to say, this is why you want to be in it. This is about being fair to your residents. If someone appreciates more than the average, then their number should be affixed to that. Or in its converse. If they're appreciating less for whatever reason, then they shouldn't be held to a number until the next revaluation. And none of the town councils want to go through the revaluation. That's the history of New Jersey. That's why outside of Monmouth, or outside of Monmouth and Somerset, the only two counties that are actively pushing the adherence to the law, but our statistics are by far the best in the state for accuracy of the assessment. And that's our goal. What happens, again, downstream, the tax bill impact of that has to come back to the people that are deciding how much the levy is, not to the people that are creating the model for the distribution.
So if you could expound a little bit on two things, really, the questions that came up while you were talking there. Referring to the administrative code, right, the state statute that requires all towns to do this. Is the state making any type of move to bring those counties or those towns that you know of to follow the current statute?
Well, that's a great question. As far as again, speaking Monmouth specific, of the 7 towns, the board has recently made 6 revaluation orders, 5 revaluation orders, with the orders that say you must do it. It's been 10 years, as the statute says, administrative code says, and after you've performed a revaluation, you must not, it's not discretionary, you shall perform annual reassessments. Those are sitting on the director's desk, and we have about 30 days left for us to hear on what the division is going to do. The interesting part is that most of the municipalities that are out say, okay, we understand that we have to do a revaluation from time to time, but we don't want to do annual reassessments. And I ask why. And the answer is, without fail, for political purposes.
So that is on the state director's desk, is that what you're saying?
That is correct. The
So if
director
this-
of the Division of Taxation.
So if the director of Division of Taxation replies to you and says that they don't have to enter the ADP program, that's a possibility?
Yeah. It is
Now, in
possible.
essence, is he telling the towns that they don't have to follow state law?
That's why it's a possibility. I don't believe it to be likely, but anything's possible.
But can't they can do annual assessments without being in the ADP program? They're required to do them, and some towns or some counties do them not through the program.
See, that's the interesting part. There's 564 municipalities in the state, and over 100 of them, so over 20%, are currently doing annual reassessments statewide. This is best of breed. This wasn't the commissioners supported, this is identified from the IAAO, the International Association of Assessing Officers. This is best practices. And the issue here is, this was not original thought. This wasn't Matt Clark came up with an idea. This was, what is the best model of distributing taxes that we could identify on the planet, certainly in the United States, and it comes to performing, the recommendation is annual. Why? Because if we're accepting that we have to update it every 10 years, and the answer to that is, well, because we don't want people to overpay and underpay, but yet we have the technology to reduce the size and the duration of the errors, why would you not do it annually? Why would you be accepting, when the law says that you're supposed to do it annually, why would you be okay, hey, if a taxpayer's not going to complain about overpaying, I'm not going to make him any wiser? That's crap. The idea here is that we're taking responsibility of addressing it. And we're leveraging every bit of technology to create an environment that puts it in front of you, that makes it easily understood, to make it assessment equals market value. And we all get plenty of advertisements of what current market value is. We're trying to make it so that if you check the box, as the law requires, check the box that your assessment is okay, and if your assessment's okay, then the only thing remaining is spending.
So if there are municipalities in the state, sorry, if there are municipalities in the state that are assessing annually, but they're not a part of an ADP program, can you explain to the council what the difference of that is? What's the difference between the quote-unquote ADP program
Sure.
and a county or a town not in ADP but assessing annually?
Okay, so the ADP was meant to be a modern approach to creating the assessments. It shifts a significant requirement to the assessor. Many assessors, this is the truth, many assessors get paid pretty well, and they go through a revaluation by using a third-party company, and they go there to the next 10 years, and they literally don't value anything. All they do is plug in numbers based on added assessments. They have no requirements, yet they're being paid significantly. If someone files an appeal, then they have to defend it. But this idea of shifting the requirement of being transparent about the assessment was a cornerstone of the ADP. So the components of the ADP are really straightforward. There's a revised calendar, and the calendar is remarkably simple, but it's worth millions of dollars to the state of New Jersey. And what it does is, anywhere else in the state, you submit the book, you have the budgetary process, you adopt what your levy is, and then you have appeals. So then if you have an appeal and it reduces the value of the town, your tax rate doesn't generate enough money to pay your current year bills. So then you have to do emergency bonding depending on the size of the reduction. And now you taxpayers get hit with both the undercollection, the emergency bonding costs, and the interest associated with it. All we did, simple, is we submit the book and have appeals, and then finalize our appeals, then adopt the budget. That transition is worth millions to the state. When things are going well and there's not a lot of appeal activity, it's worth millions. It is worth significantly more when the market contracts and there's a lot of appeal work. So, components of the ADP. Education technology is one, the calendar, and annual reassessments. They're the three points on our triangle that if you were doing annual reassessments outside of Monmouth County, there's no push to the technology and the investment from the county tax board. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on an appeal system, on education, on things needed to make the assessor better and provide public service. And then the annual reassessments, you can do that from anywhere if you make an application and get permission. But the interesting part is, elsewhere in the state, if you talk about revaluation, typically there's entities. There's entities that are politically have concerns. They're like, not on my watch, next year. There's the group that know that when they go through the revaluation, they're gonna, because they know that they're underpaying relative to everyone else. They don't want a revaluation because they're riding this wave of paying, 80% of what they should, sometimes less. So we have this, several entities that it's not in their best interest to go through a revaluation. So more often than not, it doesn't happen. If the county boards are not ordering the revaluations as the law says that they should, then nothing happens. Certainly town council's not going to say, hey, I want to do this. I want to rock the boat. They don't do that. My point here is we had to make the annual reassessments mandatory because there were entities that didn't want to do what we believe to be the right thing. And that's just, again, so now we evolve this conversation to, it's about, we're doing the assessment and the bill that is a result. Let's have a discussion about spending, about service levels. That's where this is, because if we asked anyone, we said, oh, okay, I'll cut your assessment in half, but I'll leave everyone else, so that you're willing to underpay relative to your neighbors. That's not what this is designed. This is just a distribution issue. This is about everyone paying their share of the levy based on their value.
So, in essence, and this is just a for instance, the ADP system is in Monmouth because the tax board chose the ADP system over what other annual program or assessment that the county could have chosen?
Well, no other model with multiple issues. The calendar was born and bred as part of this larger solution. Literally sat at a table and said, okay, what's wrong with the current system? And the calendar being one of them. The level of education, the investment in technology. And then annual reassessments. The 10-year model had taxpayers grossly overpaying and underpaying. So that's how we got to these three core components. While there's a lot of other things that we've developed as part of the ADP. And again, Somerset has been doing annual reassessments for 30 years. This is not, again, this is not, and the legislature has turned around and said, you know what, that calendar thing, that's so simple and makes so much sense. Let's do a one-off law on that. So anybody can do the calendar just on its own, which is remarkable to me because, I don't know, is your tax collector here?
Not yet.
Okay. There's a whole bunch of processes that are served very, very well by the simplicity of the calendar. And when you're asking about the components and the value of it, the ADP is not just a enforcement of annual reassessments. It's a package. And the package has delivered us statistically to have much more accurate individual assessments.
So if you don't mind moving to that, talking about the formula, which I forget, you put it in one of the answers to your question, under question 2, number 3, annual reassessments are the exact same valuation process. Can you just take us through that process? From what I understand, 20% of the town gets inspected, 100% of the town gets assessed.
Right.
Can you just go through the council maybe a little bit about how that process works, where you inspect 20%, but 100% gets assessed, and what that looks like?
Well, so let's make the comparison between what we're doing and versus a traditional revaluation. The valuation methods are identical, especially when it comes to single-family residence. The market activity of usable sales within your town is really driving how the assessor models his costing system. And for the single-family residential, whether it be a traditional revaluation or the assessor's annual reassessment, the process is identical because the same data is used. In a traditional revaluation, there hasn't been an inspection in 10 or more years. So a SWAT team comes in and normally through a third party and attempts to update the data for all the properties. And in annual reassessments, the idea is that we took the accuracy of the data is the Achilles heel of the assessor. If they have wrong data about your house, if there's a missing whatever, if a change was made and it's not present, then there's no way that the assessor is going to model it correctly. So the idea is, in annual reassessments, if we took the same 10-year cycle to which the traditional revaluation inspected once, we inspect twice during that 10-year period, once every 5 years. And there's other inspections, added assessments, and other activity that's going on. But the idea is we were looking to position the assessor to have more accurate data. Again, reducing the error rate. Because if you go through a revaluation and someone does a change to the property without permit the day after the revaluation inspection, they get 10 years of having the fair enjoyment of that characteristic and not paying taxes.
So is it fair to say that the 20% inspection does not really inform the 100% assessment?
No, it's just data. The assessor annually is going to rely on the data that's present relative to the property, and you do not need a immediate inspection to value it. you're making the assumption that nothing has changed since your last value. But over a long enough holding period, everybody goes through that window. I was 2 years out, I was 3 years out, I was 4 years out, and then I got inspected. So again, this is about a holding period. The inspection process is to ensure that the assessor has the data necessary to fairly calculate the amenities associated with your property.
How is the 20% selected?
Typically, geographically. And, you know, the 20% in Middletown is obviously different than 20% in Lock Harbor. The idea is an assessor may turn around and say, it doesn't make any sense because sometimes there's some friction about, I'm across the street, why'd they get inspected and I didn't, where it's converse. The fact is, the 20% every 5 years, we, the board, would be accepting that it could be, you could do 100% every year if you were a small enough town. That wouldn't be problematic.
I think what I'm asking, is it a random sample across the town?
Not
Because
at
we
all.
have a broad range of home values.
Geographically, if bird's eye view, you would look at the town and they'd carve it up into, it could be 18% because it's everything south of Main Street in this corner. That type of carving up, unless you have a different process. Okay?
So there's 5 pieces to define.
That's it.
Correct. We
Five
generally try to get the most adjacent properties together. So the example you gave, 1 year might be 18%, the next year might be 22%, because stopping at this house on this street, which would equal 20%, doesn't make any sense. So they would finish that street, they would finish that location within that year. So they're trying to get as much of the like homes in the like areas at the same time completed.
So it's not a random sample across the
Not
town?
at all, not at all. Nor does it need to be for the purpose that it serves.
Should it be?
Random sample? Not at all.
Except if you're, how do you, so if you, there are a lot of people in this room who got their assessments jumped up significantly. Presumably, a big part of the town in that area was reassessed this year. How do you then, I mean, it would seem that this is just a layperson's take. If you really want to be able to, over a 5-year period, accurately assess all of the houses in the community, I would be inclined to take a portion of District 1, a portion of District 2, a
Correct.
portion of District 3, so that you can then see what's going on in those neighborhoods.
Okay, so to be absolutely clear, 100% of the property's assessment is changing every year. It's going, whatever, it's hitting a reset button. The assessed value of every property in the jurisdiction is being reset to current market value as of October 1st of the pre-tax year. That is factual. The 20% is just data collection. And it's data about the amenities it's so that we know whether or not you change your bathroom, kitchen, and basement.
So it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter one bit, because 100% of the properties are going to market value. When you get your Chapter 75 postcard in November, it is representing its market value. If that doesn't represent what you believe the current market value is of your property, then you file an appeal. It has no connection to, well, did we get inspected in the last 5 years? It has nothing to do with that. It's just, is the total assessment equal to total market value?
And that, the market value is determined by, I know there's no, we talk about a formula all the time, right? It's not A plus B equals C.
No.
Right? So what is that market value consist of?
Well, for the purposes of the discussion in the room, market value is what a willing buyer and a willing seller would agree on the price for exchange. That is not, no one's under duress.
Determined by what's going on.
But that's the simple part. We all have Zillow. We see what is being conveyed. We know what our neighbor's house just sold for. There are no secrets left. And that's a good thing from our standpoint, because it's full transparency. When we say that this house is worth 500,000, you say, my house isn't worth 500,000, but the house to the left and right of you that are identical to you just sold for 505. How can you say that they're not? That's the simplicity of the discussion. And that discussion should happen with your representative, Mr. Fitzpatrick. You get your postcard and you don't believe that that number's correct, then you have that discussion. And he should present you with supporting evidence. And if you can't agree with that number, if he gives you comparables and you still don't believe that the assessment's correct, then you file an appeal.
What's the window for that?
January 15th.
Please do, yep.
Getting back to how you divide up the 20%, who makes that decision?
The assessor.
Is that required by statute itself or the code, or is that just how it's done in practice?
It's done in, the ADP does not have any specific administrative code adopted. It's driven by the requirement that you are submitting a document referred to as an AFRA, an application for annual reassessment. And in that document, you're submitting that to the Division of Taxation, and it's saying that you're going to inspect 20% or whatever percent you're doing that given year. And if they so require it, you have to provide a list of the block and lots.
Right, but what I'm getting at is, in other words, could we say, okay, this year we're going to change it and say we're going to do it randomly? Or is that completely left up to the assessor's discretion?
Well,
I'm not saying we want to do it randomly, but if we
Well,
were to say we want to change it.
well, you can change it, and I would believe that the assessor would be open for a change. Randomly, I can't speak for any company or whether or not, do you use an outside vendor or do you do it? So an outside vendor, you could do it in-house and have your own people do it, or you can have an outside vendor. Either way, if you do it randomly, there's a heck of a lot more communication and travel in that process. So that tracking it becomes much more difficult. We wanted to leverage our GIS environment and initially post the inspection process on the county's website. And we were cautioned against it because we don't want to say, oh, we're sending inspections, and now someone could go and say, hey, we're representing a town, because they now know everywhere that we're knocking on doors. So the point is, that's an internal process. It is managed by the municipality. If you wanted to make a change, as long as it made sense, or you're willing to pay if you want to alter it, the year of transition, we track, at the county board, I track the block and lots and the inspection attempts. It's a requirement by law. And if you were to change the 20%, the issue there is that if you change it and you went to them last year and now you go to them again this year because you've changed the process, they're going to say, we're just here. What are you doing? And so that's, I caution you, but that as long as the data is collected, that's all that the county board cares about.
Can I just make a comment? 'Cause I feel like your questions about the inspections are leading to, that's what's changing the value. The inspections are not changing your assessment, the market value, the sales, the comparables. That inspection is just like, hey, did, 123 Main Street have an updated kitchen? Because not everyone gets their permits that they're supposed to. You all know that, right? So now, like Matt said, you're not paying for that kitchen that has now increased the value of your home because you didn't get a permit. When there's permits, market's notified, then there's added assessments throughout the year. There's not just, 5 years or whatever. So the values, the assessments are based on market value comps that sold in your neighborhood, similar homes. The inspections, like Mr. Clark was saying, is just to get the data, it's the square footage in your basement. I mean, when I got on the tax board, I didn't really know property record cards and how to read them. I looked at my own property record card, it had me as a full finished basement, but half my house is crawl space, half is basement. So I can simply call the assessor. I didn't even have to appeal my taxes for it. There was a data error that without inspections doesn't get picked up. So that's really the inspections are fixing stuff like that.
Just to follow up, there's no correlation between the change of your assessment based on the inspection unless the data is incorrect. And what Mr. Clark is trying to say very nicely is that he believes, as I do, that the random will end up costing the borough more money. Because now you're sending someone here, 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 rather than getting everybody done, and then you also run into the, my neighbor got inspected, but I didn't scenario. The randomness, I don't believe would have any effect on the changes that take place or the effectiveness of what I do on a year-to-year basis. It would be something I would gladly have a conversation about if it was felt strongly about, but I do not believe that that would positively impact the borough in any way based on simple data verification, which is what the inspectors are doing.
I do have a question. So Councilwoman Al Valadoyle asked about the window of time, and I think you mentioned January 15th. So do they have the opportunity to appeal between now and January 15th? Is that what you're saying?
No, no. This gets back to the calendar issue, is that, as with all of our finances, we need to address the problem and then move on. Every taxpayer, as a matter of law, has to receive a notice, and you then have the obligation to question the accuracy of the assessment within a window of time. You have a minimum of 45 days from, bless you, from when the postcard is, or you're given notice of the assessment. And if you do not act, it's referred to as a fatal jurisdictional defect. If we lose our jurisdiction to hear anything if we don't have an appeal timely filed. So if you don't file an appeal, with minor exception, like if there was a clerical error and the assessor owns that there was a clerical error, we could address it. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of the assessments, if you don't file by that deadline, New Jersey-wide, then, because you want to be focused on the assessment, not the impact of the tax bill.
So January 15th is something to do with the calendar that you were talking about earlier. But
Yes.
You're saying that from the time they receive the postcard or it gets sent out, they have 45 days.
A minimum of that. So, sure. So we send out the postcards somewhere around November 15th. And so you're actually getting 2 months. If we need it, please let me know what.
It was just a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're November 15th of the pre-tax year. So November of this year, we're sending out the bills for 2025. Then you have January 15th of 2025 to file at the county tax board. If any of your properties are worth over $1 million, then you can file at the tax court, but then the matter wouldn't be heard for some time.
You said the tax bills, do you mean the tax assessments?
Forgive me. Oh, feel free. I
The notice
apologize.
of assessment cards will
No-
be going out mid-November.
Yes.
If you're
Yeah.
getting around December and you haven't gotten it yet, they are available on the county website, or feel free to contact me directly, and I will give you what the number is, and we can, I can give that to you via email, over the phone, whatever makes it easy for you.
But we have the obligation to deliver it to every taxpayer in the state. So they are available, as much as they're available online, we have the obligation to give it to you.
We've had a couple of residents say they never got them. That happens, I'm guessing, through the post office, but you're saying that they all go out?
They're small.
Yep.
Yes, like,
Well,
They get lost in the
they are printed. I can certify that they're created. We do that in-house. We go through 255,000. I can certify that they were delivered and counted by the postmaster in Freehold. What happens after that, I can't guarantee. So, and I've, on rare occasion, in 32 years, I've had to go to the tax court and testify to the process, and then it's up to a judge whether or not they believe that the person did not get it.
but you're saying the information is available online, or they can contact you regardless?
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So, want to make sure I understand, going back to the questions regarding some municipalities being in the program and some being without, I just want to make sure I understand what you said about equalization of those that may have not been assessed in a while. Are you saying that, you know, a municipality such as Lake Como that is reassessed every year, or say they're at 100% of that equalization factor, there's a neighboring municipality that has not been reassessed since, say, 2018, when you're calculating the county tax rate, an equalization factor is applied to take that into account?
Yes. So the assessed value, which is static back in your example, 2018, in 2018, the assessment equaled the market value, total value of the town. And then each year it went through appreciation, so now it's probably, 2018, it's probably 60% of what its value is. So we would add 40% to that value to make it the equivalent of 100. And so there's no escaping shared levy, but there continues to be a distribution within the town.
Understood. Okay. In terms of the appeals process, do you know off the top of your head how many appeals were filed last year?
I think, for Lake Como, 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Were there any significant changes after the appeal? And I guess finally, specifically to the data we're seeing in North Boulevard, have you seen even countywide under the program, I think like on average, property values increased over 40%, or some specific lots that were close to 57, 58%? Have you seen other instances in the county where there was such a significant increase in a single year?
Yes. Yes. There are, but it's atypical. It is, and the question is, if the assessment is currently correct based on data, and the year over year, do we believe that the value went up that much in 1 year? No, and this is anecdotally, or a post-mortem review of it. The reality is that in a perfect world, the last couple of years would have been greater increases than they experienced. But that's at the discretion of the assessor and based on available data. So if we go through the process and it's this concept of taking the known activity, if a small town has 20 sales and it's saying that on average the assessments from last year went up 5%. If you had no other data, you would apply 5%. That seems very rational to every neighborhood. What I just described is exactly what happens in every revaluation in New Jersey history. They take the active sales and apply it to the inactive areas. And so in this case, could the assessor have been more aggressive with those numbers? I'm not going to play Monday morning quarterback. What I do know is that the current values absolutely appear to be supported by recent sales. And so if we accept that as the beginning of the conversation, then we can analyze going backwards, not, what next year is, Next year is dependent on exactly what's happening during 2024. What's happening now is another neighborhood, is there evidence that the assessors overassessed and underassessed? I fully believe that the assessor will make the appropriate adjustments based on the areas within the town that are unique neighborhoods. And the county's going to do an overview of whether or not statistically it makes, it's supported by the data. And if it does, then it's accepted as a sufficient legal book. And if what then happens is, does the taxpayer individually believe that they're wrong? If they're wrong, then they should call the assessor. If you have a problem with the assessor, then call me. But I'm gonna try to boil it down just to the math. Is your property record card? What a great starting point to all of this. Go online and look at the data that the assessor's using about your town. Is it right? Because if it's wrong, that's a bell curve. If it's wrong to your benefit, probably not gonna get a phone call. If it's wrong because they have you for something that you don't, absolutely call the assessor immediately and have that fixed. That's all that we're trying to do is create an environment that the value is being estimated based on the actual amenities of your property. We're fairly comfortable with the dimensions of your land, and there's not a huge topography issue here. So what remains is, do we have the details about your structure? Are there any easements? And is there details about what's finished and the quality of it? But that makes a big difference in the willing buyer, willing seller. If the kitchen and the bathrooms are all updated, we could have a couple $100,000 swing in the sales price. So that's why it's so important. We can't just say, oh, well, 2,400 square foot is 2,400 square foot. We know that not to be true. We know that a 100 by 100 lot on Main Street is not the same as on North Boulevard. For all of these reasons, the assessor has to be armed with the right data. And that's all that we're trying to do, is position it so that the assessor has what they need to calculate it. And if the assessor's wrong, then it has to be fixed. If there is an error, I don't want it to go beyond a year. That's the best public service that we can provide, is to ensure that this doesn't happen for more than 1 year.
Is there a difference between your process for residential versus business?
Sure, yes, much more detailed on the process for income producing property, class 4 commercial, industrial, or apartments. There is a different model. As one of the methodologies of estimating value, in class 4 property, in income producing property, we're always going to check our modeling based on, did it sell? Did we know about, at the end of the day, a bargain and sale, arm's length transaction is our cornerstone for calibrating how we do this in technology. The idea of getting a handful of data points that are sales is what we're relying on. Again, a point that is identical to the revaluation process anywhere in New Jersey.
When you were saying a home is 5% of the total, and you're 5% of the total bill, so you would be paying based on that percentage. Are businesses counted in that?
Sure. Anything. We're blind-eyed to its use. It's the market value, and the market value, so the assessment of all your businesses should be based on what their market value is. So if it's 2% or 10%, that should be annually reviewed and updated by the assessor.
I just have two final questions. And the first one has to do with assessment as well, so I wrote that first. Your little card that you get, or the assessment you get, is broken into two pieces. your land and your improvement. Is there a difference between assessing either of those? I mean, obviously, the improvement is going to be different on almost every home. You're gonna have like homes. But the land, the dirt, is that just based on sales? How are
Well,
the,
in a town like this, we don't have a ton of raw land sales, but we do have sales where there are knockdowns, which then represents the value of the land if you're removing the structure. So the assessor is getting some data about what a builder sees the market value of a buildable lot. So the idea of, the courts being a fickle thing that they are, they've said that, you're not appealing the components of your assessment. You can't separate the land and the improvement. It's the total value. There's case law that actually says that it's arbitrary construct by the assessor on how they assigned it to land and building. I disagree with that. I think there damn well should be some math behind it, and the reality is that the components should be defendable on their own. But at the end of the day, the market value is, what's the total value? What would it? When you're a buyer, you don't say, well, I'll pay this for your land, but this for your building. No, it's the value of the property and all of its amenities connected to it. So,
so why is it separated?
well, because we have vacant land. We start with, there's lots of properties out not in your town, but there's many jurisdictions that have thousands of vacant land parcels without structures. So our modeling has to develop it by component.
And my final question before I open up to the council again. In response to question 3, you discussed the director's ratio. Can you explain a little bit what the director's ratio is?
Sure. I had made earlier reference to this concept of the assessment divided by the sales price. And it's just a percentage. In the year of the revaluation, the assessment is supposed to be equal to the market value, so the ratio is 100% or 1. So the director's ratio is a very interesting program. Whoever came up with it, 60, 70 years ago had to be brilliant because it still has value today. All that they're doing, in its simplest form, is looking at all the sales within your town, and they put them in 2 buckets. They're usable, meaning it represents market value, or it's non-usable, like a divorce decree. It's a dollar decree. So we get these deeds, the assessor gets deeds, and that's how they're conveying ownership and market value, and he's putting them into 2 piles. For the ones that are usable, represent market value, they're simply looking at the relationship between the current assessment and the sales price to determine how we did that equalization, whether or not there's a need to increase it 10%. It's just tracking the average relationship between the assessments and the sales prices.
Anything else from council? About council?
Nope.
Anything else? Thank you very much for your presentation, answering the questions that we had. You have some water back here. You've been speaking for a little while. You need some water?
I'm good.
I appreciate that. At this time, I will open it to the public for comments and questions of the council. If there is a consideration that I can refer to the assessors, that I will do so. So anyone wanting to come up and make a comment for the council can do so now. We just need your name and address, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Higgins, and thank you, Council. Thank you, Mr. Clark. My name is Ron Carriola. I'm a property owner at 397 North Boulevard.
Thank you.
I've had an opportunity to talk to you, Mayor, and meet with Mr. Clark, and thank you for your time. Just by background, I'm in commercial real estate. I have an accounting and finance background, so I understand how all this works. And in my opinion, much of what Mr. Clark has said tonight, I agree with. I think he's correctly applying a model that makes sense. Where I think the biggest disconnect is, it's not being equitably applied. And when I look, I'm putting together a model. I'm going to use my house as an example. But this model applies to every single resident in Lake Como. It also applies to every single resident in Monmouth County. And when I work backwards, think about the ADP, think about PDA, right? Let's work backwards. Let's take a look at our taxes, and it all starts with the payer of taxes. I start with my tax bill and work backwards. And I put together a model that if my house on North Boulevard was in our neighboring counties in Belmar, Manasquan, Avon by the Sea, Spring Lake, Seagirt, and Manasquan, my taxes would be $10,000 to $12,000 a year less expensive by working backwards. And the way that I come up with that is, my assessed value has gone up year over year by 130%. Over the past 3 years, it's gone up almost 200%. Neighboring towns, Belmar, 0%. Avon, 0%. Spring Lake, 5%. Seagirt, 114%, Manasquan, 0. So the challenge that I have, and I'm not disputing anything that Mr. Clark said, is it's like, Mr. Higgins, I think you're involved in education. It's like being a math teacher, and everybody bombs a math test except for 2 or 3 people. Well, you know what? We're the 2 or 3 people that got A's on the test. Belmar is not studying for their exam. They're not reassessing their taxes. Matt's job as a teacher is to curb that exam. So he's bringing up Belmar and Manasquan and everybody else who's not reassessing their properties to curb the grades. And while he's doing it, and doing a pretty good job at it, it's not impacting everybody on an equal basis. I'll give you a case in point. Property at 212 North Boulevard. I don't know who the people are, and I'm not picking on my neighbors, but they're closer to the beach than I am. They happen to be in Belmar. The house just sold for $2.5 million. The assessed value of that house is $1 million. It's been $1 million for 10 years. So it's hard for me to accept that we are being treated equitably relative to everybody else. I think the program makes sense, but you have to apply it to everybody. And everybody has to be in it, or else it doesn't work, and we get penalized. The other thing that I have a problem with here in Lake Como, and Mr. Clark, you touched on it tonight, in commercial real estate, properties don't really trade as much as they do in residential, so you don't have as many sale comps, but you have an income approach. So for example, Bar Egg, much larger property than my property, pays almost the same taxes as I do. And I'm sure that property is worth a lot more. I'm sure they make a lot of money on it, and I'm sure that's why they're not selling that property, right? So the commercial properties after COVID have lost value, or they haven't traded for a number of reasons, because debt is crazy right now. You can't get loans. And as a result, an unfair amount of the burden has been shifted to residential property. So, yeah, and I agree with it's Mr. Fitzpatrick, right? It doesn't really matter. It's really a compliance thing. Does this house have 4 bedrooms? Does it have a new kitchen? Is the basement correct? That's more of a compliance thing. It's the assessment and the data that they're using to apply to our houses. When 3 houses on our block sold for a lot of money, we got hit pretty significantly with taxes, and not everybody else did, both in our town and in neighboring towns, and that's what has us concerned. And this is not a political statement, but we have 50+ years of bad tax policies in New Jersey. It's not getting any better, right? The state subsidies are less. Why? Because the tax burden has been shifted to fewer people. There's fewer taxpayers in New Jersey year after year. So I feel like we really have to take a stand now, because I'm paying $26,000 a year. I don't want to be paying $50,000 a year in 3 years, and a lot of the other people in this room don't want to either. So I will volunteer because I kind of understand how this works now, and it works in principle. It's not working in practice because it's not being applied equitably, and I don't know what our course of action is to correct it. I don't know the answer. How do we get Belmar and Avon and Manasquan pay their fair share, because they're not. They're not. So, it's really not a question, it's a statement, but, yeah, and Mr. Clark, I appreciate all your time and follow-up, I really do. But it's a problem. And I don't know what the answer is.
And I appreciate your comments. I think our discussion tonight kind of led with those questions about how is it fair to Lake Como as compared to other communities. I think we got a lot of answers about what the process is right now. What this council here has to do, representing everyone sitting out there, is try to figure out how we can represent you to make it fair for you as compared to other places as well. What does that mean? I mean, does that mean we wait to see if other towns go in it? I know for a fact that I've talked to other towns, and they're gonna do everything they possibly can not to enter this program. Does that mean that we look into doing what we can to get out of the program? I'm just saying options here, right? Do we look at doing what we can to get out of the program? If we can get out of the program, do we go as far as, this is gonna be very far out there, do we go as far as suing the state of New Jersey to make sure they are enforcing the laws that they've created, right? It sounds to me that there is a state statute out there that is telling every town in the state of New Jersey they have to do something like this. 60% of them are not, or 80% of them are not. So you raise a lot of good questions, and I don't have the answer. You're a lot better at this than I am. We've met each other, we've known each other really for about a month now, right? I'm sorry that we had to meet. I'm glad that we had to meet, but I'm sorry that we had to meet. You know more about this than I do, and for you to say that you don't know what the answer is, we have to figure this out, what's best for our town, and how to make it fair for you or make it fair for everybody else in this town. So there are options, and there are options that we have to discuss. I agree with what you're saying. That's where I can leave it at that.
Thank you.
Mayor, Mr. Clark, though, said that they true it up, so that the Belmar residents you're talking about, they're hurting other Belmar residents, but they're not paying less to the county. And that's what I heard him say, and I think,
That's exactly what I,
I mean, again, this is your area of expertise, but
Mr. Carriola, you've nailed a lot of the issues. The one disconnect that we do have is that Belmar is paying their fair share relative to this. Because of equalization, they are being converted. The problem is, when you look at the distribution within that town, you're absolutely going to be able to find a ton of properties that are paying far less than they should be in their tax bill, because they've appreciated year after year after year for 10 years at a rate that was greater than the average, so that they are grossly underpaying. Doesn't mean that the total bill being paid to the county or the municipalities, Belmar's bills are getting paid. It's being paid by the wrong people within Belmar.
But, yeah, and Mr. Clark,
I do have this specifically to answer that question.
I agree with that. However, I will say, property values in Belmar, Spring Lake, Seagirt, Avon, and Manasquan have appreciated at a higher rate than Lake Como, and our taxes have gone up at a higher rate, even with the equalization. So I don't disagree that you're trying to do that, but it's like curving a test when everybody bombs. And I'm a skeptic. I don't believe that Belmar's really paying their fair share, and I agree with Mayor Higgins. I think we need to go to the state and say, look, if we're all going to play by the same, we got to play by the same rules. We're not. It's like raising your kids. Somebody's cheating on a test and they're getting better grades. What do you tell them? And I feel like that. And it's not your fault. I'm not accusing you or the program. I just see what's being done. Number one, I don't understand why Bar A is only paying $34,000 a year in taxes. Right? I don't get that. That's not right. And that's something we should be able to deal with at the town level. But I don't understand why 4 houses from mine closer to the beach is assessed for less than half. and we're not gonna argue the assessed value, they're only paying 15,000, I'm paying 26,000. That's not right.
Okay,
That's not right.
so tomorrow, they go, you ask for the board to take action. The board, as I started with, the board has made those orders to bring those towns back in. And I agree with the mayor, I believe that those towns are going to fight, at least some component of it. We may ask why, and I think that's a really interesting discussion to have, is why do you want out, if it's fair. But the expectation is, if the answer is yes, that, and so that in 2026, if the orders are, standing orders as created by the board are that the municipalities in question perform a revaluation during the course of 2025, so that all assessments are equal to market value for the tax year 2026. When that happens, the shift to those properties that are in question are going to be dramatic. And when that happens, it will absolutely prove the point that they've been underpaying for an extended amount of time, to the detriment of their neighbors, not to any other town, but within the distribution within their town. They've been paying less, and someone else in town is paying more than they should have.
If I can just add to this, and for my clarification, because I have to try to think about these in the most simplest terms. If we're gonna use Belmar as an example, and I don't wanna pick on Belmar, but it's right next door, and it's a town that is not in the ADP program. They are paying X amount of money to, say, the county.
Correct.
And that is being distributed among their residents.
Correct.
If they reassess tomorrow, would that X amount of money be higher or lower?
I wouldn't expect a significant change at all, but the individual bills are expected to change dramatically.
Some going up, some going down.
Exactly. Again, let's say it's $1 million. Who's paying what is what's going to change. These are the examples where the properties that are at a assessment director's ratio, a ratio less than the town's average, are going to jump more to 100. If someone's at 50%, to go to 100, they have to double. If someone's at 75, it's only 25 points. That's the simplicity of the change. And the increment is exactly why the board is passionate about why this is necessary. Because the property that's in question doesn't want a damn thing to change. I don't, but it's not, there's other properties in the town.
I understand that, and I'm sorry for interrupting. After we met, I went back, because I want to be fair, I don't want to just say, Ron, you can go pick out examples, right? More than 70% of Lake Como Borough, it's knowable, because it's transparent. The assessed value of our properties have gone up more than 40% over the last 3 years. Some have gone up more than 200%. Belmar is 0. And my argument would be...
The assessments are static, they wouldn't change.
My argument would be, when I look at the real estate valuations, by the realtors, Lake Como's at the bottom on appreciation, right? It's appreciating, and it's going up in value, but relative to our surrounding communities, it's not going up by as much. So I believe that if everyone was in the ADP program, Belmar, as an overall community, would be paying more of the Monmouth County tax bill and more of the school tax bill. I believe that's the case. We'll only know.
But their school tax bill is theirs. Their school tax bill is not ours.
But some of it gets allocated from, so doesn't some of it get allocated? Isn't some of that the allocation from?
Only from my response today, regional schools are allocated based on equalized value. If you're within the town, if it's your grammar school, no, it's not shared by anybody else but you.
So that's, I understand it might be a little bit confusing because our kids go to Belmar Elementary School. But their school budget is different than Lake Como's school budget. So our budget is only centered around the students that Lake Como sends to other schools for tuition. They send 90 students to Belmar Elementary, and they send 51 students, roughly, I think, to Manasquan High School, and then there's some other students. Our budget for our school is only to pay tuition for those students to go to those schools.
So with that being said, the percentage of total taxes, let's use my neighbor's property because it's what we've been talking about. I'm at 26, they're at 15. 25% of their $15,000 is going to school taxes. 48% of my 26,000 is going to the school. That's a whole lot more. I'm telling you, there's something not working out here in the math.
No, I understand what you're saying. That's like a town size discussion, right? So we're a small town and we're sending kids to a school. If we had a school, it would be higher, right? If you had Lake Como
What I'm
Elementary.
saying, excuse me, we are higher.
Yeah.
Twice.
I'm saying if we had our own school, we would be higher than that,
We would be 4 times as much as they want.
probably, yes. Which is one of the reasons why, because we don't have a school, we don't pay the administrative costs that other towns pay. We don't pay for capital projects that other towns pay for. We pay specifically to send a student to another school to be educated. Which is one of the reasons why we don't have a school, because it's cheaper to pay tuition. If you look at examples, I believe there is a discussion in Seagirt right now with this situation where they're having a debate on getting rid of their elementary school. I don't know if it's much of a debate, but there's a discussion about should they get rid of their elementary school because it would be cheaper for them to send their kids to another district to be educated because of whatever their rate is. You can't quote me on that because it has to do with.
Seagart's paying 15% of their taxes to schools. We're paying 48% of our taxes to schools. It's not, that doesn't, with all due respect, that doesn't make sense. Not with the data I'm seeing, it doesn't. So what I'm saying is, I'm gonna close it. My thesis is, it's a good idea in principle, it's not working in practice, because it's not uniformly being applied. And with the appreciation in values, we haven't captured the municipalities that are not participating in the annual reassessment, and as a result, towns like Lake Como are paying a disproportionate amount in taxes. That's my conclusion.
Okay.
And I'm going to make this model available for everybody.
Yep.
It pulls from Zillow, and it pulls from Monmouth County, and you can put in your address, and it will compare your house to what it will cost you in taxes in the surrounding boroughs. And I'm just terming it. Hopefully, there's no patent on this, but it's PDA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Buchanan, 528 North Boulevard. So I want to bring up just one example that I found, and I'm just going to bring it up. Spring Lake, 65 South Boulevard, almost 8,000 square feet to home on a half-acre of land. Is paying $24,000 in taxes. The home value assessment went up $2.14 million. The home is valued at $4.9 million in 2024. Their taxes went up $107, or less than 0.5%. Mine went up 63. So I have questions about processes and how we gather information. And I have to ask this question. So, Mark,
You gotta ask me, Jim.
I have to ask you.
Yep.
Could you ask Mark? Do the tax assessors update the values of every single home in the towns they assess manually? And how many do we have? How many homes do we have?
I believe we have 1,006. And the answer to your first question would be yes.
You put that in manually?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you have to go to the real property and you have to input your results, right? Like I thought This is what I thought.
What kind of results are we talking about? We're talking about like specifics?
You're gonna
I don't
make a
do it-
change.
I don't do the specifics on a year-to-year basis, but the changes that I'm making, I do make them globally, and then I review them individually because there's 1,000 homes. So I am able to do that on a year-to-year basis.
So what I'm saying is, you have to go in there and type them in. If there's a change in the value of a house or value of the land, you have to type them in.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so that's, and you do that for Eatontown too, right?
Englishtown.
Englishtown. Okay, that's a lot of entries, just saying. Your fingers must hurt.
You mean each individual
I don't do
home?
it each individual every year. I don't do it
So
individually
how
every
does
year.
everybody get updated?
Because I can make global changes in my canvases.
Okay, so there is a
System.
system
There's a system.
that
It's a
would-
program.
So there is a program.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So if you were gonna change something, all right, I have to ask you. So those changes are changed globally and manually on the real property taxation list, tax list, correct?
Correct.
So, do specific people have access to Lake Como's data, or is it just Mark?
My guess it would be Mark and probably the county tax assessor as well?
No, we house the data as a cost savings, it's centralized on a server, but the input is entirely your employee.
Okay. So any manual changes will be done by whoever the tax assessor is,
Correct.
okay? I think I have one more question. Oh, this is it. So, DN, how'd you say last name?
Antoine.
Antoine, okay. You asked a question about, has there been 40% increases in other places? Mine went up 60, the average was 40 on the boulevard. But you asked if there were other counties. Do you know which counties, towns went up that much? Do you
No,
know?
that was my question, if there were other
I know,
instances in the county that went up.
But what specifically, where were those places? Was it in, say, Seagirt? Was it in Asbury Park? I don't know, so.
And I don't think Mr. Clark gave a specific
Yeah.
answer to where those happened.
Right, so I was
he
just
did-
wondering where else that happened.
I don't know if you know offhand where that happened, where that happened.
I don't want to misquote, I certainly can provide town council with a list of outliers. So essentially what we're talking about are the outliers of the average increase. And every town is going to have outliers, both above and below the average change. Because we're going to have outliers that went out less, some properties that were reduced theoretically because they had an error on the property. So we could find a property where the assessment was reduced. If you didn't do your homework, you could turn around and say, oh, this individual property was changed dramatically and its assessment was reduced. But when we look at it, the structure was destroyed by fire and all that is present is the land. So year-over-year change is a step to get a understanding of global change or specific change, but every one of them has to be analyzed.
So I would only be interested in things that weren't outliers, that experienced that 40 to 60% tax increase or evaluation increase, and they stuck. I don't want anything that was a mistake. I don't want anything that had a fire. Just assessments that were done in that 40 to 60% range in other towns close by. I would like to see those. And then I have one last just one.
You said one before.
I know. That was before.
It's the last one.
I have, after this question, I may say I have one more. Okay, so trying to figure out how land is assessed. And what I did was, I calculated things on by square foot. And I found that land values, I don't know how they're calculated, but there's no consistency to them. For instance, two houses right next door to each other, there's a difference of $40 to $45 in per square foot assessment. So if you live on that side and I lived over here, you're paying $45 more per square foot than I am, even though we live right next to each other. And I'm just talking about the land. I also want to bring up that the square footage values range on North Boulevard from $81.32 to $380.66. What I saw was 399 North Boulevard. It's that big property in front, the grass in front, and then there's that house in the back with no heat. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, it's 399. The house is like a garage with a, I guess, a parking above it. It's run down. It's
393.
393. Yeah. So that home.
So we're talking in Belmar, we're not talking, no.
No.
It's like
Gotcha.
399.
Yep.
393.
I got it, I'm following you.
Okay, so 393. Thank you, folks. All right, so that house was assessed at $30,000, and it appears to me
The improvements on the property.
there are no.
Well, the improvements mean the structure that's on the property.
The structure on the property is assessed at $30,000.
Okay.
The land was backed in to match that millionaire status. I don't understand that. If land is going for $81 in one area and $380 on that particular property, there's no consistency. So I don't know about a formula, but I'm a high school math teacher, and I can't get any equation that would give me these results. None. And if you could do that, Mayor, I would have a lot of respect for you. So I'm just wondering, how fair can you be unless you go to every single house and look at every single thing, every single year, which I think is impossible, and the outliers are way too big. It's like you poked the bear, and now we're looking. That's all I have to say.
You.
Oh, I did have one more thing. Well, never mind.
One more after.
Regular meeting.
I'm Bob Turchin, 508 North Boulevard. So just so you guys know, I think everybody knows, when we get our little assessment cards, we don't know, like, I got mine, it's like, oh, 2.1 million, hey, wow, this is wonderful. But I don't really know, excuse me, what my ultimate tax bill is gonna look like, because I don't know what the rest of the town's been assessed at. So you're not likely to get arguments or just discussions like we're having now from people who just see their tax bills and say, geez, I'm a newly minted, multimillionaire. And so maybe I'm asking, perhaps that an improvement can be made there so that we can anticipate. Because one of the big problems I saw with what happened now was I just saw a tax bill that had like triple what I paid the last quarter. And it would have been nice to have gotten a little warning on all that and been able to maybe have something like this prior to that. I don't know who saw what when, but that would be one of the suggestions I would make. The other thing I'm assuming, and these are questions, not statements, there's a frenzy of activity in this higher end of the market on North Boulevard, and I saw it. You know, everybody saw it. I presume on places like 22nd Avenue, that's not the case. So perhaps your assessment, you're not going to comp sales because perhaps there's not as many comp sales in that area as there are in ours. If that's true, I guess you go to the cost replacement and depreciation model to figure out what they're worth. So maybe I'm wrong, you tell me. But I guess the big question, and maybe everybody here has the same question, is, and assuming that these assessments are done and have been done every year, how can 15% of the parcels in the town have decreased in assessment value? And 49% gone up only 0 to 7%. What was our, can I ask, what was our budget up year over year? Like, what was the increase?
So as far as whole dollars or rate?
Was it 5% from the year previous or prior, 22 to 23?
I don't have it in front of me right now. I can get it for you. I'm sorry, but I don't have the budget right in front of me. The rate went down this year. Now, you talk about rate.
I've just started at the total budget for the town.
I don't know the number.
Page 10 of the book. Page 10.
This?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I just see levies.
It went up a couple $100,000 this year because we didn't get the grants that we got last year.
I guess what I'm saying is most people would expect roughly that their tax bills would increase the amount that the budget of the town goes up year over year. I think everybody here would agree with that. And we know that there's going to be some, some aberrations. But if this year, how long have we done the year-on-year thing, assessments?
2015?
All right, so then there shouldn't be any big surprises year on year. Like, I didn't, like if you're telling me my house last year was worth, I don't know, 40% less, or somebody else's year 60% less, and that kind of, I don't know, that doesn't seem to make sense. But anyway, the question still stands. 64% of the lots and the properties in this town had a maximum increase of 7%. And while, I'm reading this right, what is it, 100, where's ours? What is it, 15% had these gigantic increases that we had? So I guess, was that a matter of these other homes not appreciating as much because they didn't have as many comp sales? And could you foresee something in the future where, this crazy activity you had in COVID, where you had a lack of supply, you had people making these big moves, and a lot of these higher end properties undergoing, like just these, the sales activity, and these lower end ones not? Can you see that changing? And is there any way that you might consider smoothing it in your model? So you're looking at it in chunks of 3 years in terms of, increasing.
So Bob, I'll try to answer your question first, and I'll ask our assessors if they want to fill it in, because I know you're directing your question to me. So I will say that from what I've learned in the scenario that you've given is that if you have a home that, according to the assessment, is close to or at fair market value previously, you're going to see a lesser of an increase in that assessment from year to year, correct? Okay. So it's kind of interesting because there was a resident in here before that was here for another reason. I knew why she was here, and I told her that she didn't need to be here because that reason wasn't happening tonight. But she said, "Oh, that's very interesting too." She goes, "I was looking at my tax bill, and I realized that last year I went up 35% in my increase in my assessment." And she said, "But I didn't really think about it this year because I only went up 3%." Right? I think that's where we are this year, where you have a number of homes that may have actually not increased in assessment by a lot, and their taxes may have actually gone down, because if you look at everybody on a spreadsheet, anybody whose assessment went up 2.5% or less, their taxes actually went down because the rate of the budget went down within the municipality. What you are experiencing, and I think Mr. Clark said it at the beginning, is that atypical, right? That huge jump, which they didn't expect, or we didn't expect, or I didn't expect. So that's why you see different parts of the town going up different percentages in their assessment.
But are you saying that that huge jump didn't happen for all of these properties? Or was there some anomaly that occurred in the last couple of years where those properties didn't jump enough?
So I believe that was the answer that Mr. Clark gave, that was that they were actually under-assessed in previous years.
But
Am I
in this
correct?
model, they shouldn't be, correct?
Well, I think what they're saying, what the tax assessors are saying, and I'll ask him to jump in because I don't want to speak for them, was that according to the market value over the past years, they did not have enough data, or they didn't have the data to increase the assessments
And so that,
appropriately previously.
right, and so that data would rely most heavily on comp sales. So to my question before, if there are not a lot of sales occurring in some lower valued neighborhoods, and I'm gonna guess that's the case, because as we know nationally, it's been an issue where, you know, with mortgage rates the way they are and a lot of people having sub 3% mortgage rates, they can't sell their homes because they want to stay in the same area and they can't afford to. That doesn't necessarily hold the case when you have people coming in from New York City and wanting this lifestyle and the North Boulevard, those type of sales. So perhaps where I'm going with this is that perhaps maybe we're not valuing the bulk of the other properties properly to get them up to perhaps the appreciation levels they should be at. Thus, that might take some of the sting out of what the select amount of properties in North Boulevard are experiencing.
I appreciate your point. Thank you, Bob.
Can I just make a quick comment on that? I mean, I do review all sales every single year. So if I saw that a area of town was not selling for what I was putting on, they would go up as well. Last time I did a review, my sales data compared, my assessments compared to the sales data was fairly accurate for the rest of the town. I'm not under assessing other people and just attacking one section. As the mayor noted, there was certain areas that have gone up significantly high in other years based on the data that was available at the time. I know there was, we talked about with North Boulevard, there was a little bit of a lack of data to show this sort of significant increase. But I did do my best to look at comps, like properties, things like that, to show and to prove value. I just believe that this was, we keep using the word anomaly, but I really believe it's the correct word for that time frame. I didn't anticipate it going as high, appreciating as quickly as it did in such a short amount of time compared to what I was seeing with comparative data.
Mayor, if I may, three real quick points. One, Chapter 75 postcard. We have several times asked the legislature to modify the data. It's controlled by statutory law. We created a estimate of tax impact that would be given to you as part of that, and overwhelmingly they said, hell no, we're not interested in that discussion. Number two, tax rate estimator, because the legislature wouldn't make the change. To be clear, our Monmouth County people were in support of it. It was statewide that it was shot down. Because it was shot down, tax rate estimator was created by the county tax board. If you look on the county's open public records website, underneath the tax board, when you receive your postcard, we've created an environment where you put in your address, and it will give you the ability to estimate based on the changes. To your point, it's not just enough that you know how much you changed, because if everybody rose the same amount, it would be a wash. But it's a relative issue, and that's the complexity of this issue. And the real world explanation is we want to arm you with, to the best of our ability, an estimated of a new tax rate based on all your neighbors' changes, not just yours. And the third final point is there is nothing in statutory law that permits the assessor to smooth anything. There's discretion on what the data says, but they cannot pull back from what the assessment what they believe it should be because of what the tax bill implications are.
So real quick, just to follow up on that, discretion, right? There's gotta be a human factor to this.
Yes.
If 4 houses on North Boulevard sell for $2 million, and then one sells for 5, and then 2 more houses sell for $2 million, how does that $5 million sale affect the assessment? Does it affect it?
Well, we'd have to look at we try to analyze why it's an outlier.
And I mean, if the houses are similar, if all the houses are similar and that house went into a bidding war,
Well,
And somebody from New York came
we're
down,
not
I'm
gonna
gonna
see
pick
a
on New York.
25%, a 20% difference. We haven't seen that type of change, because we have bidding wars.
but all due respect, we saw an anomaly this year that we haven't really seen either. So, I mean, anything is possible, and I think
Okay,
that's a
fair
big
enough.
concern.
So the discretion of the assessor has to weigh the totality of the evidence to determine what the expected, it's not the highest price, it's the most likely price. That's, by definition of law, it's saying most likely number that should be expected for the conveyance of that property.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Hi, Stephen Petrosino, 312 18th Avenue. First, I'd just like to make a comment. I understand how the whole tax system works. I understand how assessments work. I think when you go after homes that are well-maintained and there's a level of pride in ownership, it raises the value of a home. Therefore, it raises the taxes of the home. In the town, we do have a number of deplorable houses. Most of them are rentals. And the landlords really don't have an emphasis to fix them because their taxes will go up. And I don't think that's fair. So when it comes into the assessment factor, I think you should look at the number of bedrooms versus the quality of the home. Because you can have a dilapidated 4-bedroom home with a large family, with a lot of tenants going to the school system, and it's a burden on the taxpayers who have a 2-bedroom home that's in meticulous condition. And I think we have to look at that as well, not just look at what is the ground worth, what is the structure worth. Because one structure can cost the town a lot more money than the well-maintained structure that has an elderly couple in it with no kids in the school system. So I think that should be looked at as well, not just a simple value, hey, yes, granite countertops, and they have a nice new house with new windows, but it's a smaller home, but it's assessed much more because it's nicer. So that's one thing I think should be considered. That's just a statement. So then, when it comes to I understand we used to be a 10-year assessment, and then your tax rate changes throughout those 10 years to make up for the dollar amount. And in 2014, we went to a annual assessment. Is there any more cost involved? Number one would be, who pays for that assessment? Is it the town?
We do, the town does.
The town taxpayer. So does it cost us more to do it annually versus our once every 10 years, sending out a team of people to assess the homes, and then we just calculate the rate? So are we spending more money to do this?
So I can tell you that was one of the first questions I've ever asked in this position about it as being the mayor. The answer that I received, and I'm going to defer to the assessors too if they know. The answers that I received were that it was probably equal and not much different, but if you know what you're paying every year, it's easier for the town to budget for. That's the answer that I received. Would you be able to add to that?
We were, so the answer is, one of the intents of the program was to have the administrative costs be reduced. We did that by shifting. In the old model, you had a revaluation company that came in and did the inspections for a line item cost and a valuation cost, and then appeal defense. In the creation of the ADP, we shifted the appeal defense and the valuation to the assessor with no increment to their salary. So the line item cost, roughly, when we started this, The line item cost was originally $72 per line item was the cost of a revaluation every 10 years. And our original contracts for inspections were $20. We doubled that for $20 every 5 years. So to compare apples to apples, it was $40 for inspections versus $70. The cost, that the delta between the two, that $30 savings roughly, was savings to the taxpayer through administrative costs. So the intent of this was to actually reduce the cost to the taxpayer, increase the burden on the assessor, but arm the town with them having it be created by their employee, not a third-party consultant.
So the intent was to save us money,
Yes.
did it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I had just asked, I believe that your contract is somewhere around $30, might be less than that.
I mean,
Okay,
if
so-
we have math teachers in the room, so I could do pretty good division when it's just 1 divided by 10. I mean, there's one cost every 10 years, now there's 10 costs every year, right? So there's one cost to assess.
No.
Well, if you assess properties every 10 years, I'm not gonna make a big deal of this, because it's really not.
That's like one-time cost.
One-time
versus-
cost every 10 years versus every year 10 times.
But the cost every year is less.
No, I
than
know
the
it's
cost
less,
would be in-
of
yes.
course it's less, but is it a tenth?
So
And then we know where we are as a town.
So my original answer, and I mean, we can find out for you exactly what it is.
Shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, I can't find out right now.
Well, no, I-
But when I inquired about that originally, what we realized was it was pretty much the same, right? If you're, and I would never suggest 10 years, but say you did it every 5 years. And every 5 years you're paying, $100,000 for an assessment, you're paying $20,000, round numbers, every year for 5 years. But,
And it wouldn't be huge, I know that.
Right.
That's not really my purpose for it, but it leads to the next question. So the way I understand it, there's 53 municipalities in the county. The county is here to tell us that this program is good for us as neighbors. The bid they're selling us is that amongst our neighbors, it's good. They're not here for anything but to make it good for us. So if there's 53 counties, that's 53
Towns.
slices, I'm sorry,
Towns.
53 municipalities, there's 53 slices of the pie. Is the county taking in more taxes from any specific municipality that's over the amount that that municipality is receiving from the county in lieu of services?
No.
In other words,
No.
so we're equally dividing the pie.
No, it's based on proportionate share of value. You wouldn't want to send Lake Como Middletown's bill. So it's based on value. You wouldn't want to send Deal's
Right.
bill. The reality is it's not based on consumption, it's based on value. We could spend days talking about what is the best method of dividing up the cost. Is it per capita, is it per property, is it people in the school system? Lots of different ways to decide on the distribution. But we would need a constitutional amendment in New Jersey because the Constitution says it's based on the town's value. It's based on a property's value. And that's been found in the courts to be the market value. So the idea of Middletown paying significantly more, which is in your packet, I wanted to get the enormity of the difference of the bill being sent by different towns. So I've armed you with that answer.
And I know that, I guess what I was trying to get to is, if we reassess Lake Como every year, and we know that there was a huge property increase in this area because of coastal town and because of COVID, and people were spending money down here, are we now being penalized because our taxes are now gonna go up drastically,
it's a
based
great
on
question.
our assessments are gonna go up drastically. Therefore, our town as a whole is gonna have a higher assessed value. That, I mean, that,
But even the town next door that didn't reassess, their equalization to calculate the value of Belmar, not to pick on Belmar, but if their relationship is appreciating at the same rate, the data that the assessor is using in your town for the annual reassessments is the sales, for the most part. To calibrate their costing system, he's using sales. And the sales will be based on year over year, the appreciation observed in your market. The same data is being used in the equalization process for Belmar. So while, because of annual reassessments, the year over year change on average in this town requires the assessments to go up 8%. The equalization is in Belmar is using the exact same metrics, the relationship between the assessment and the market value, because they have static assessments. Now, through the appreciation, the question was asked of the director's ratio. Again, this statewide analysis of just sales. It's nothing more complex than that. It's just looking at the individual sales and saying, what's the relationship between the assessment and the current sale price? As the appreciation happens in Belmar, their director's ratio, their percentage of assessment, went from 60% to 50% to 40%. As appreciation happens, that number drops. So to equalize the town for distribution of all the shared levies, they have to equalize or add more value each time that there's evidence of additional appreciation. So this idea of whether or not, are you going to have to pay more because you're annually reassessed? No. I maintain that the town's distribution between the 53 players is accounted for in equalization. What's not being accounted for is the fair distribution within the town.
I understand. And that would be the same going west. So it would be the same equalization.
Absolutely.
If you go inland.
Anyone in Monmouth County.
So you're here to tell us to be better neighbors.
No.
There's nothing hidden being sold to us. It just.
There's no, what,
It's a very hard pill to swallow, I must
well,
say.
I don't,
Because I think it's the town's job and this council's job to make sure that they're all being good stewards to each other and we're all getting a good representation. And it sounds like when you do the annual assessments, we're not doing the entire town, we're doing this little chunk of the town.
no, you don't. No, that's a point that the room has to wrap their head around respectfully. Every assessment, no, that's inspections.
Well, that's what I meant.
But, so that's just data verification.
Right.
That's all,
And
the
then you take
assessments.
percentage on the inspection of just that piece of.
No, 100%, every property, inspected or not, the assessment's being changed to market value.
I know it's being changed. I just thought maybe that the north area, the North Boulevard area was getting a hike because that was one of the inspections.
That's nothing
It's
to
just
do
for
with
data.
Okay.
No, it was based on sales.
I'm skeptically optimistic.
Hi. Yeah, hi, my name is Mike Rothman. I'm actually at 393 North Boulevard. My mom's property. She's almost 90. But anyway, I just had maybe a comment, it's kind of a question. I'm not really sure. I've heard a couple of things, so I just wanted to maybe summarize it and see if I got this right. I think one of the points that has been made is whether the ADP process is penalizing the homeowner. And I'm not really sure I'm not sure where I'd find that data, to maybe prove that. It seems like maybe the process itself is not flawed, but seems like maybe, COVID and the desirability of the shore has shifted the burden towards the coastal communities. And maybe that will equalize again over time. It seems like that may take several years or more before that sort of shift kind of redistributes itself over the rest of the state. I don't know whether you can comment on that based upon what you're seeing.
So you, again, you gotta direct your
Oh, I'll
comments.
direct it to you, sorry. Yeah.
So yes, that has definitely been part of the discussion. I think the comments from our assessors today were that it was unexpected, the rate of what's the word? Appreciation, thank you. Couldn't think of the word. Over the last so many years, 4 years, 3 years, what have you. Part of what we're talking about and what we're thinking about is we live in a very unique area. Part of the discussion is maybe what's good for Lake Como and Belmar and Manasquan and Seagirt and all of these may not be good for Allentown or Hightstown or other parts of Monmouth County. And that's another question that we have to weigh too. Is that really fair for us? Are we going to see continued jumps like this over the next 3 or 4 years because of the anomalies that you're talking about? So that's part of the things that we have to weigh with each other.
Right, so it seems that, and I'm not sure where this will, go, except that it does seem like, the taxation burden has sort of shifted maybe to, you could say, at least to the coastal communities, because they became more desirable over these last few years. It's unclear whether that will sort of redistribute itself and whether the model that we're using, and I don't know whether ADP has some factor in that, in terms of the distribution of the tax burden across the wide communities. The other comment or question I had is, we like to be data directed, but when we don't have very much data, oftentimes, we can still claim we're data directed, but maybe not do the right thing. And so I think the other thing that I've heard is that if there are very few homes that are sold, and oftentimes if they're in neighborhoods where people aren't selling, that you are going to see this distortion in the assessments. And it appears that that data, you can see that in the data. And I think some of the people here have compiled some of that data and sort of saw that as a result, right? And so I'm wondering, what do we do as a, how do we sort of address that? And because it seems like that's probably the bigger factor that we're saying, yeah, over some number of years, maybe that will correct itself, right? Because there'll be more home sales, and after a while, that'll sort of average out. But it feels to me like, especially on North Boulevard, we're being penalized, and that may continue for some number of years. So I'm sort of wondering, and my question is, how do we, address that? Because it seems like the data is not going to fix that maybe for quite a while.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I believe the assessor commented that they took that into account. Is that correct? So why don't you quickly ask your question?
There really isn't the data because the home prices, there aren't enough home sales to generate a fair amount of data in that particular area. It just makes it much more difficult to figure out how to reassess those homes. Right? That becomes kind of the guesstimate part of it. That's the part that
I understand what you're saying. Yes, data drives everything. When there's a lack of data, you have to use what you have in order to do your job. We've had a lot of people come up here and talk about the data and this and that, but nobody has come up here and said that someone in town is underassessed, at least residentially, right? So I feel like, once again, we keep going back and using this word because I really do feel it is the right word to use. With regards to North Boulevard, the anticipated appreciation was wrong. it anticipated at a greater rate than what I had thought it was gonna have, and that based on the data that I could find and that I did use, I'll use a quote, to pull back the curtain.
But one thing.
To pull back the curtain, I went to other places, Belmar and Bradley, and tried to find comps in those towns as well, to say, okay, if you want a house on North Boulevard and there's nothing for sale on North Boulevard, where is your realtor taking you to next, right? What's the next place they're gonna go to? And there was some data there that I did use to help create my models. So when the data isn't directly in front of you, there still is data available. It just may not be as specific as, okay, this house sold for this price, I know what that's worth. So the data is, the implied data is there, and then something else that Mr. Clark had mentioned is sometimes is just a general increase in what the town goes up as a whole. That's also a market indicator, right? We look at market trends, we look at market indicators. Just to kind of circle back around, did not anticipate the appreciation of North Boulevard moving as quickly as it did.
So maybe the thing that's confusing is that if 40% of the homes in Lake Como appeared to not appreciate it, and there was very little data maybe to support that either way, that's the part that maybe is hard to kind of understand, right?
But you're making an assumption that their assessment is wrong because I didn't have the direct data for it.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly what we're
I
saying.
don't know if I'm making an assumption, it's just, the thing that is hard to understand is how did 40% of Lake Como not appreciate?
So and somebody asked this question prior to you, okay? So, when we're looking at the town as a whole, and there are parts of the town that are assessed at or close to their market value. So they would not appreciate the same rate as a house or an area of town that are not assessed at or close to their fair market value. So those depreciations on those sides of the town, right, for lack of terminology, homes on that side of town would appreciate less than homes on another side of town because they are closer to the market value than on this side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the assumption that they won't refer close to market value, and therefore they didn't, there was some appreciation that was already factored in, I guess, right? And that's the part of it that I guess maybe I don't quite understand, I'm not sure if all the other people behind me.
Yeah, and listen, and I think if you need, like, if Mark even said, if you wanted to sit down, you can sit down and talk to him, and he can kind of map that out for you if you want. But that's basically where that appreciation happened. It definitely happened in a previous year. Like I said before, there was a woman in here before that said she went up 35% last year, and this year she only went up 3%, right? So that, I think that appreciation was made up previously. All right? Thank you. So you're only allowed one comment at the workshop. You can make a comment at the regular meeting after.
3 questions.
What's that?
He had 3
Yeah, but you only come up once. That's why I wanted them to sit down, so we didn't ask any more questions.
Thanks so much
Sure.
for running this. I have
I just need your name and address, sir.
Roger Sorbo, over at 1802 Greenwood. I get it, the market value, I don't agree with it. I have some fundamental questions though. I think Mr. Clark mentioned something about the Constitution requiring that all the towns, but not all the towns participate, so I'm not sure about the Constitution requirement then. That doesn't foot, doesn't make sense. And as my neighbor said before, still concerned about the overall cost of the annual assessments on all this stuff. Unlike one of the previous questioners, I'm not a commercial real estate guy, but I do look at the property values in Spring Lake, and there's a dramatic difference in tax assessments and market values. And when I say dramatic, it's huge, you know, hundreds of % difference. So I'm just curious on how that gets addressed by the county. And then just lastly, you know, just having been in business before, we don't need to be a leader here. Leaders in product development always pay the cost, and they usually get the profits from it. This doesn't look like a leader here. This is one we should follow and let everybody else get on board so that everybody else gets fairly assessed, because it doesn't seem like we're on quite yet. So that's my comment.
All right, appreciate it, thank you.
I can't ask one more?
Now, you can go back to the regular meeting, can't do it here, sorry. We don't have you on the time limit, but we got you on an appearance limit.
Jim Nugent, 608 North Boulevard. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. So I'm just going to go back to, you know, kind of a question that might not be able to be answered here. So as we see, we're basically saying the model's the model. Too bad for you guys on North Boulevard. But what about the people whose lives are affected that might not be able to pay? And so as this anomaly happens, there should be some consideration. Wait a second, you know, this, maybe you made a good faith error or, you know, good faith misjudgment. But what about those people who can't afford to pay? There should be some discussion that, how do we work this out? Because it doesn't seem fair to say just, hey, the model's the model, too bad, suck it up, pay it, or what? Might be some people might have to sell their house. Who knows what they have to do? There are people on the block who just are on fixed incomes who can't afford to pay it. What happens to those people? So it's a real question, and it's something that everybody should stop and think about, because it's tough for some people. It's very difficult, and it's life-changing. So when things like this happen, it's life-changing for a handful of people. Like I said, there's 1,000 houses in town.
Yeah, 1,006, I think.
So if there's 950 people in town, I really don't care about the other 15. Hey, they got nice houses on North Boulevard. But there's still people, and there's still people who just, some people just live there all their lives, and all of a sudden, they get whacked in the head. So just wanted to say that there should be some consideration. I know the model's the model, and we've got to follow the law, but it just seems to be unfair for a lot of people.
Appreciate it.
The question is fact. With respect to the tax card for each individual house, is that online?
Is that what?
The property
You can get it
card
online, yes.
for your house, the property card the assessor uses. For
Yes, you can.
it is.
I mean, you just have to Google Monmouth County tax records, and one of the first thing that comes up is, you can look up anybody's card.
If you have trouble finding it, email me and I will send it.
Thank you.
It's linked on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, just to address your issue, if I may, there's no, I have no intention of standing before this room and being cavalier about the change. It's not, well, it's the model, it's the model. No, it's, we are in strict adherence with the law, and we can change it. Every dollar, every program made available, like the senior freeze. There are programs the legislature has put into place, safety nets for controls over property tax bills. But the thresholds of those being available are really what the discussion is about, because every time that you freeze someone's taxes, it puts, the bill's not changing for the town, someone else's bill goes up because of that. And so the point is, I personally, I'm not taking this lightly, and the year-over-year increase and the impact of it is real. We labor over just trying to get it right. And for everyone that I've spoken with, most people believe that the assessment is not far off from what they would sell their property. The concern is the real world tax bill, and I get that, but there is nothing in the assessment function that allows us to change the assessment, we need the legislature to make the difficult decisions about changing the thresholds, building in a safety net, building in a cap, building in, all of those things, when we discuss them, means that every dollar that I take away from someone paying based on their valid assessment means someone else has to pay more. That's the net of the entire very, very difficult, moving from uncomfortable to actually painful reality of property taxation in New Jersey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no one else at this time, I'll close the public portion of the workshop meeting. And it is 9:52. We want to take a 5-minute break? You need to go to, no? Okay, we're gonna push right through? All right. Do you need to take a break? All right, we're gonna push right through. It is 9:52. I'm gonna call the regular meeting of the Lake Como Belmar Council to order. Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Before we get to the Sunshine Law, I just want to thank our guests who came with us here tonight. Matt, Mike, thank you very much. And our other guests who were not invited but did take time out of their night to show up. I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Yep, have a great night. Sunshine Law, please. Thank you. Mr. Trell, I think you left your purse?
Thank you.
All right. Anyone in the back who's having a discussion, if you could take it out into the hallway, I'd appreciate it. We are recording the meeting. Roll call, please. Did we do that? No. Roll call.
Councilmember Whitty is not here tonight. Councilmember Scull?
Here.
Antoine?
Here.
Councilmember DeMario is not here tonight. Councilmember Ventris?
Here.
Abala-Doyle?
Here.
Thank you. At this time, I'll take a motion for approval of the minutes of the August 6th meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? At this time, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of the August 20th, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have no communications. We'll move right to reports of committee. Councilwoman Albala-Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. All matters are in order.
Thank you. Councilman Ventris.
Thank you, Mayor. All matters are in order.
Councilman D'Antuono.
Thank you, Mayor. All matters are in order.
Councilwoman Scull.
Thank you, Mayor. All matters are in order.
I do have a report, I'm sorry. It's going to be very quick. We did have listed on our workshop item tonight, originally was the discussion of one-ways and parking within the borough. I did table that, and what I'm going to do is assign a committee to discuss this, a committee of the council members, Councilwoman Scull, Councilman DeMauro, and Councilwoman Albala-Doyle, to discuss this as a committee and bring back recommendations to the council, either at the next board meeting or the board meeting after, or council meeting after. I was not able to get a definitive response from our engineer in time for the meeting tonight, so I think it's important for the engineer to weigh in on that topic and even meet with the committee to discuss their findings. So I did pull it from the agenda tonight, and we will attend to that at the next, hopefully at the next council meeting or the one after. Other than that, all matters are in order. I will take a motion to open for public comments on the new business and consent agenda.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone wishing to come to the mic to speak on anything listed under new business, that is the payment of bills and the executive session? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution 2024-121, offered by Councilwoman Scull.
Thank you, Mayor. Offering Resolution 2024-121. Be resolved by the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Lake Como that the proper officers be directed and authorized to make payment from the following accounts. Current account, $28,337.97. Water and sewer account, $4,377. Tourism account, $350.42. ACH wire payments, $516,206.91 for a grand total of $549,272.30.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Skull?
Yes.
Antoine?
Yes.
Ventrice?
Yes.
Valenzoll?
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes. Resolution 2024-122, offered by Councilwoman Albala Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. So offering Resolution 2024-122, be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Lake Como that the proper officers be directed and authorized to make payment from the following account, the New Jersey Natural Gas account, for $93.52.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Skull?
Yes.
Antoine?
Abstain?
Ventrice?
Yes.
Valenzoll?
Yes.
Thank you. We have Resolution 2024-123, offered by Councilman Ventrice.
Thank you, Mayor. So offer Resolution 2024-123, resolution of the Borough of Lake Como Council executive sessions. Whereas the Borough Council of the Borough of Lake Como must discuss matters which are not appropriate for discussion in a public meeting, and whereas these subjects are within the exceptions of the Open Public Meetings Act and are permitted to be discussed in closed session pursuant to NJSA 10:4-12B7 and are covered by the attorney-client privilege. Closed session is estimated to be 30 minutes, after which the public meeting will reconvene and action may be taken.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Skull?
Yes.
Antoine?
Yes.
Ventrice?
Yes.
Valenzoll?
Yes.
Thank you. We will go into the executive session after the second public comments section. With that, I'll take a motion to open for public comments.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone wishing to make a public comment to the council can come to the mic and do so now.
I'll save it.
You know what, Jim? You just stepped up on my list there. You're moving up. Thank
Too
you.
late.
Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. At this time, the council is going to go into executive session. We're going to get executive session in this room. So we're going to ask you to leave the room. We'll close the doors. We will come back for